then? Can we take attendance?
Yes, I see Dan Ramsey, Sue Pellman, Jim Bach-Huber, Julie Urban, and Warren Giebert.
Yeah, first item of business then is a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Move to approve. Bach-Huber.
Second.
All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item of business then is agreement with Chuck, right? Proposal.
Yeah, there's actually two proposals, both of which he's done before, both related to our MS4 permit. One is for illicit discharge inspections, and one is to do an education thing at the high school or middle school, is it, Chuck?
No, it's actually at the high school,
Okay.
the senior biology class at Middleton High School.
The kids will let you back in again, Chuck?
Yeah, we go and we have a rainfall simulator that we have the kids all simulate rainfall. And then we take a bus tour and tour around and look at some like the confluence pond and talk about stormwater pollution prevention to the kids. So it's a thing that I've been doing for many years, and we kind of got it down to a science now.
The kids show interest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they definitely do. Warren, we've been able to utilize some of your information that you've given me in years past on the confluence pond and the phosphorus reduction that occurs there. And they always ask questions, well, what happens when it fills in? And we have to talk about, well, then we need to, remove some of the sediment in that. So yeah, there are a number of questions, and we typically look at a bioretention facility, a wet detention basin, a dry detention basin, and then we go look at some porous asphalt or the 4 stops we take on our little bus tour.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So the way the agenda shows, it's kind of a combined funding, but it's really 2 separate agreements for 2 separate amounts of money. That's the way it works?
That's correct.
I'll move approval of the agreements.
Ramsey, a second.
Before we vote, do you ever think of contacting the Milton Times and getting sort of a feature article in the paper?
We have not thought of that, but that definitely is something. We have it scheduled for, I think it's the second week in April. We already have the spring session, and I'll be happy to contact the Times, and if you think it'd be worth it to have them publicize it in some way.
Sounds
Well,
good to
they may
me.
get a story out of it and come, show the kids out there. So I mean, it could be a good thing all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something other than sports.
And editorials on the airport.
Do we have to amend the motion for that?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. All in
You
favor?
can take care of that, right, Chuck?
Oh, yeah, I'll take care of that.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
All right. Well, hold on. Next on the agenda, we have Yahara Winds. I think I just saw Kim Meyer pop up,
Mm-hmm.
but Kim is here to give us an overview and the 2020 annual report from the Yahara Winds program.
Hi,
All right,
Kim.
are you ready for my presentation then?
We are. Would you like me to give you control, or just you could tell me when to flip screens?
Sure, this will work.
Okay.
All right, so I'm Kim Meyer with Yahara Winds. I'm actually a Madison Metropolitan Sewage District employee, but You'll learn in a little bit, if you already don't know, that MMSD is highly involved with the Yahara Winds group. I function as the Watershed Program Coordinator. So if you want to advance to the next page. So today I'm just gonna talk about what, why, and who Yahara Winds is, the progress that our group has made so far. I'll highlight a few watershed efforts that are going on currently, and then just let you know about an innovation grant that we have available. I'll go to the next one. So Yahara Winds stands for the Yahara Watershed Improvement Network, and it's a collective initiative to clean water throughout the Yahara watershed. And I'm going to explain in a little bit why Yahara Winds exists, but Yahara Winds functions focused on adaptive management, and it's a water quality strategy. Basically, we're trying to improve water quality through the entire Yahara watershed. And how this works is all sources work together to reduce phosphorus. And we found that it's the most effective, least expensive way to fix our water quality problems. And yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. So there's two main reasons why Yahara Winds started. The first one is the Rock River TMDL, total maximum daily load. So basically what happened is that the DNR assigned the watershed. You've got the Rock River on the left, green, and you can see the Yahara is in the far west side of that watershed. Zoom or look over to the right where the Dane County is. The Yahara is right there in the middle around our lakes, and it goes up into Columbia and down into Rock County. So it's a pretty big area. But what this did was the DNR said, hey, if we want to improve water quality, everybody has to do their part. And they assigned a pound reduction for municipalities, wastewater treatment plants, and agriculture. And so that really helped initiate this effort. But one of the big things, if you want to go to the next slide, the big thing for Madison Metropolitan Sewage District was a change in regulation for effluent. So on the left-hand side of this chart is the raw wastewater. We receive wastewater from a lot of communities. So we collect that obviously from Middleton, but from the Village of Dane, Wanakee, Morrisonville, DeForest, Cottage Grove, Monona, McFarland, Town of Dunn, Fitchburg, Madison, Verona. Okay. Probably missed somebody in there, but it's a really large area. We also receive a very large amount of rural septics. Each year we collect about 12,000 private septic tanks are delivered to Madison Metropolitan Sewage District. And if people are emptying their septics on the 3-year rotation, that's well over 30,000 private septics. So when we look at our wastewater, it's not just a city issue, it really is a whole community. We all have a stake in this. But the raw wastewater that comes in, we get about 44 million gallons every single day. It's about 6 milligrams per liter of phosphorus. In 24 hours, we treat that material and we end up with 3 products in the end. We collect about 100,000 gallons of biosolids, which some of you may know as MetroGrow, and that's land applied throughout our community on agricultural land. And then we also have a product, it's struvite, so a mineral buildup that occurs in pipes. We have a system that collects that, and that's mostly made of phosphorus. So we have a phosphorus fertilizer that then gets shipped out and it's put into horticulture products. And then lastly, with the clean water that we release, we release about 90% of it in Badfish Creek, which is south of Madison between Oregon and Stoughton, and then another 10% in Badger Mill Creek, which goes to the Verona area. But after all that treatment, we get down to 0.2, 0.4 milligrams per liter, which is actually really clean compared to a lot of other treatment plants in our state, but it's not enough. We have to get down to that 0.075 milligrams per liter. So if you want to go to the next slide. So basically that's how Yahara Winds started. So we had regulation that had to be met, and then all of the players through that TMDL had reductions they need to meet over time to improve water quality. So before my time, actually in 2017 is when this became official. All the towns listed here, villages, cities, including Middleton, and then wastewater treatment plants. We've got Madison. There's a treatment plant in Oregon and Stoughton. There's a fish hatchery for the DNR, and then the UW-Madison has requirements. So all of the people on the left, all the communities on the left, they pay for pounds to reduce. So like Middleton and other communities are making changes to reduce phosphorus, but obviously it's not going to happen overnight. So you pay in for pounds that you want to cover to meet those goals. And so that money goes then to some of the folks on the right-hand side of this page. So the majority of the money is spent in the agriculture area because it's the least expensive. You can get the most pounds for your dollar working in agriculture. So we've got 4 groups that are working directly with farmers. We've got Dane County Land Conservation Office, as well as Rock and Columbia County Land Conservation Offices. And then we have 1 farmer-led group that we work directly with, Yahara Pride Farm. So that's where the majority of the funds go. We also support financially. USGS does some monitoring for our program. And then we work with Rock River Coalition for their stream monitoring. So Dane County and Rock County, Columbia, they focus on a lot of different things, but a lot of their efforts are what we call hard practices. So like grass waterways, grade stabilization, and they really focus on soil loss reduction, because if you can reduce soil loss, you can reduce phosphorus loss. Yahara Pride Farms focuses a lot on like the annual practices like cover crops, low disturbance manure injection. So that's really how it works. We meet quarterly. We've got a board that helps make decisions on funding, but our whole group has a voting power for approving our budget and other things. Want to go to the next slide?
Say Kim,
Yeah,
quick question. This is Jim. Who is the Middleton representative on that board?
I could look. I have a whole sheet. Maybe at the end I'll let you
Maybe
know.
Eric knows. Eric, does he know?
Gary was, and then he stepped away. I cannot recall.
That's
who I
okay.
put in
It's
his
a
place.
go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, that's
all right.
okay. So we have a goal for our adaptive management plan. We have to get to 95,000 pounds reduced. So this chart here shows in the blue is our goal, 2017 out to 2036. And the green is the reductions that were reported to us from those groups like Dane County Land Conservation and those in Yahara Pride Farm. So the pounds that they've reported to us, currently we're ahead of schedule, which is great. We still have a long ways to go, but there's been some significant change, especially if any of you travel north of Middleton. There's been a lot of changes on the landscape in certain pockets of farm communities.
Hey, Kim,
Yes.
is it okay if we ask questions as you go through?
Sure.
So the green, that's modeled reductions, not actual measured, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is modeled, most of it through SNAP Plus, through people's nutrient management plans. So it's identified in modeling. If
Okay,
you want to go to the
thanks.
next slide, this actually will show, actually, I'm sorry, it's 2 slides. It'll be the water quality. But this here, quick, I'll just explain what this is. This is just those pounds divided up by the stream reaches. So actually, all of these stream reaches, we are at or above our goal currently, with the exception of the red 9 Springs Creek. That's down near the sewage treatment plant, and that is mostly developed. So we're looking hard for pounds of phosphorus, but it's going to take some time. But definitely in the Middleton area, Dorn Creek and Pheasant Branch, there are some farmers that are doing a lot of work for land conservation.
So in Pheasant Branch, reach 62, is that the North Fork?
I don't know. It's mostly out, obviously it's partially in the city, but most of the cities within that reach 64. It's mostly out to the west.
It's both forks, both north and south.
Thanks, Eric.
So I know in the confluence pond, we trapped 5,000 pounds in that year, 2020. So you don't take credit for that or not?
We don't, unless things are reported to us. This is all agriculture reporting. So I don't know how it works for the MS4s though. You know, you have reductions. I'm assuming you take credit for that in some way.
Yes.
So.
And just be, just if I could jump in a minute, everything DNR requires for this reporting of these phosphorus numbers is calculated. They do not have a requirement for monitor at this point in time. So everything is modeled and calculated, whether it's rural or urban stormwater or rural runoff, SNAP Plus and WindSlam. And that's per the permit requirements.
Okay.
If you'd like to go to the next slide, Eric. So this is the water quality results from USGS. We have additional monitoring stations we have connections to, but these are the main ones that we report to the DNR. So Dorn Creek would be the closest one to Middleton, just for your own reference. The black line on this chart is our goal of where we want to be at the end of those 20 years. So prior to the adaptive management program, we did have some practices going out in the watershed. We had a pilot project up in the 6 Mile area. So this shows that those points of the median total phosphorus concentration are kind of all over the place. And in 2018, you can really see those points come together. And currently there is a downward trend, but this, there's not a lot of data here in the downward trend. So this is, it looks really good right now, but we can't speculate really if this is a positive change or not. I think we're actually going to learn a lot more soon. The Yahara Clean 3.0, I don't know if you follow that, but that is going to be coming out in May. And I've heard that there's some more clear data, specifically on the 6 Mile Creek, that things are looking like there is a real downward trend there. So we're going to continue to watch that.
Kim, since you're monitoring upstream and downstream from these areas, have you get a chance to look at the loads calculated by USGS?
Well, USGS takes care of all this for us. So we only look at the phosphorus concentration, but what I've heard from Todd, who works at USGS, is that the loads have actually increased because the volume of water has increased.
Right.
So what we know from the concentration is that the things that we're doing on the landscape are helping, but we have this battle with this increased flow that we haven't figured out how to deal with yet.
No, that's a problem.
Yeah. So
We got the same problem on Pheasant Branch.
yeah. If you want to go to the next slide. So here I'm just going to talk about some of the projects that are going on. A lot of these might look really basic, but I do want to point out a lot of this stuff, though it seems really basic, these are high risk things for farmers. When you think about how a farm functions, if a farmer starts farming by themselves by the age of 20 and retires at 65, they basically have 45 chances to get it right. So making a change within their rotation is a really big decision. And fortunately for us, we have farmer leaders, farmers that are willing to push the envelope and try these things out and share with other farmers so they can gain confidence in trying some of these new things. So this picture here, this is of composting. This has a couple different benefits. One, a lot of the load going into the lakes comes in the winter, from a lot of it from land applied manure. So this practice, oftentimes this is started with headland stacking. So instead of the farmer putting the manure out on the field in the winter time on snow, they can stack it in a safe location and then come back and compost it. But this requires quite a few things of the farmer. One, they have to give up acreage. They have to handle the manure many times. They need specialized equipment or pay somebody to turn the compost. So there's a lot that goes into this, but there's a few farmers that have been really successful at it. And another benefit to this is that it reduces the volume of the material, which then allows the farmer to transport it longer distances to fields that maybe need the phosphorus more than the ones that are closer to their main farm. So this is just starting to gain traction. We really hope that this continues. We are doing a project. Madison Metropolitan Sewage District is funding a project with Yahara Winds and Yahara Pride Farm. And we're trying to find some answers to nutrient availability of the product and soil health benefits. So then this product could possibly be marketable to farmers that have a higher need for phosphorus versus the dairy farmers that have this product and maybe don't need as much phosphorus on their farm fields. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is a picture of a corn silage field. The north of Madison, there's a lot of dairy farms, and a big food source for the dairy cows is corn silage. So with corn silage, you harvest the corn plant at like 6 to 8 inches, and all you're left is a corn stalk. So there's not a lot of residue to lay over the soil over the winter time and in the early spring. So it leaves a lot of the soil exposed, which then you can have runoff. Here, the farmer has put in a cover crop. You can see the green growing in there. This was planted in the fall after the corn silage was harvested. And so it'll stay over winter, and then spring, especially this next week, if we get some rain, all these cover crops that are out there will really green up and protect the soil. So again, this is a really great saver for phosphorus, but it costs the farmer the fuel and time to plant this cover crop and the seed, and then fuel and time to terminate it, because this is not a crop that they typically harvest. It's just a cover crop, protects the soil, and they plant their regular crop in it in next spring. And if you go to the next one. This is actually a picture of a field from Madison Metropolitan Sewage District. So obviously manure is a phosphorus source that we have in the landscape, and fertilizer, but biosolids is also a source, products that come right from the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District. And as I showed in that slide earlier, a lot of the phosphorus in our waste stream goes to this product. So we've invested some funds. We've got 3 of our 4 applicators equipped with what they call low disturbance injector. So this field was a soybean field. It was harvested last year. And then this is a spring photo where the soil lines are where this injector was put in the ground and the material was put underneath. So this keeps the phosphorus under the surface, and it protects the soil because we're not tilling it all up. So this is also a practice used by a lot of farmers with manure as well. If you want to go to the next one. This one is actually right in you guys' backyard. I took this picture a couple falls ago. This farmer is farming amongst all the busy traffic as they're all leaving Middleton at the end of the day. But this is a picture of cover crops. And then, so this person had corn silage, as I showed in that earlier photo. They planted a cover crop. They let the cover crop grow, and then they're low disturbance manure injecting over that cover crop. So they're not disturbing the cover crop. It'll still be there in the spring. I just thought this was a really great thing, not only for water quality and for phosphorus, but it was also really great along the city edge because, as I said, there was a lot of traffic, people driving by, and you didn't smell manure, and it actually looked really nice. So these are just another example of things going on. And then if you want to go to the next slide, it's a picture after he's done. So it kind of crunched down the cover crop, but that'll come back and you can see the dirt where the manure was injected.
Is that pretty expensive for the farmer to do that?
Well, so you've got the investment in the applicator, which usually the applicator on the back of the equipment is about $40,000. But once they buy that, then they can use it. It takes a little more fuel to put this in because you're doing like a really minor tilling, but it's not a surface application. So there's more power that's needed to do that. But overall, all the farmers like it, and they feel that they get more out of their fertilizer because you don't have the nitrogen loss when you surface apply. It's all staying in the ground. And then the cover crop too, like I mentioned, there's money and seed that goes into this. But as a farmer does this more and more, it improves the soil health in their field, and oftentimes improves yield as it reduces runoff. It has a lot of benefits that maybe they don't realize initially, but can be realized later on by doing this practice more often. So this is something that we cost share with Yahara Pride Farm. Dane County has money for cover crops, and actually Yahara Pride Farm has a tanker that they rent out. And then also a lot of the custom manure haulers, which there's a lot of them in our community, a lot of them have low disturbance manure injection, so they can cover a lot of acres. So it's definitely much more widely adopted than it had been even just 5 years ago. So. And then I did want everyone to know, because this applies to everybody, we have an innovation grant that we have available every year. And the application process is actually open right now until April 1st. But we ask for new untested water quality improvement projects. We will fund up to $10,000 for a project, and the application process is really easy. It's mostly been agriculture projects, but there was one that I think would be applicable to urban. There was a filter system that was tried in Dorn Creek, silted up pretty bad. There was more silt in that stream than was anticipated, but some of those filters may be useful in urban stormwater. So if there's any products that on the urban setting that folks would like to try, there's funding available to give it a shot and see how it performs within your system. And we have on our Yahara Winds website, we've got some really good information. And then I did want to point out on our website, and actually attached, I'm fairly sure, to this is our annual report. We have an annual report that goes out every single year to recap what I talked about with the phosphorus reductions and the water quality savings. This also has some of the innovation grant projects highlighted. We did a feature on a Yahara Pride Farm farmer. There's about 60 farmers that are involved with that group. So this report is a really nice outline of all that's going on. And there's also a little recap of some of the water quality data if you want to read about, get some more details on that. And then our budget is also in there. So with that, I don't know if there's any other questions. I should look up the representative. I apologize that I do not know that off the top of my head.
Well, I think Gary, who was the treasurer, and since his retirement, no, I don't think there's anybody from the city on the board.
Well, there is on the group representation.
Rich and I are both in the group, yes.
Okay.
And actually, can I ask you a quick question about the presentation a couple days ago?
Sure.
Those phosphorus bags that they put in
Mhm.
Bourne Creek, were those in a location where you had recently dredged, or the county had the Suck the Muck project?
Yes.
Okay,
That's why I think it was surprising. It'd been dredged down to the old bedrock or the the stony bottom. There's still a lot of sediment moving through there. But
well, I wonder if the hydraulics had changed a little bit such that it wants to continue to collect sediment in that spot now.
yeah, maybe. I do know that the USGS data has shown a big reduction in phosphorus, but apparently there's a increase in nitrates, which Todd at USGS said maybe had something to do with the way that the stream works with the shoreline. The dynamics have changed, and therefore there's different nutrients lost due to those changes, which I don't personally understand, but that's the message that I received. And also too, like these conservation practices that I highlighted, they seem to be very location specific. Farmers are really encouraged by neighbors, and that one farmer does it and maybe something looks kind of crazy, and then they see it succeed and then they might try it out. So there's still a lot of pockets, specifically by Dorn Creek, that there's still a lot of tillage going on. Like these farmers are in compliance of what's expected of them as a farmer. But when we talk about water quality, improving water quality, there's some pockets maybe where farmers aren't doing those extras. And we're obviously continuing to work with those people, but I think that may have something to do with the sedimentation, depending on what the neighborhood norm is. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you probably saw those pictures, Eric, in the presentation where it appeared to be clean and clear. And then I believe that one photo was later in that same day where there was already sediment being stopped at those filters.
Yeah, that was strange.
But I was thinking that those filters may be a thing that could be tried out in more of an urban setting. I feel like stormwater retention ponds, those would likely be more successful, but I really don't know what the sediment loads are. It's probably neighborhood specific, I would assume.
Or even parking lot catch basins or inlets, perhaps.
Sure.
Hey, Kim, this is Warren.
Yes.
We're very interested in reducing flood peaks and phosphorus load from the North Fork, and we've identified a site for a detention infiltration pond. That possibly we could get an easement, but I think where we left it is that they're better off for someone in your organization to work with the farmers than the city. Is that something ongoing? Do you know anything about that? Or
Well,
do you?
I do know that the Yahara Pride Farm group had conversations with, I don't know who came to a Springfield Town Board. I'm assuming maybe it was Gary or maybe one of the engineers working with this project. And there's definitely mixed opinions on the farmers because ultimately it could take away a large portion of their crops for a year. And that
If it was-
neighborhood and really any neighborhood north of the lake, as you know, like the land is really valuable. Land is really hard to come by. So max production has really been the goal because they have animals they have to feed. So I think having a really large area closer to the city, they felt that wasn't the best option. But I do know that the farmer group had discussed that maybe having more of those catch basins smaller and maybe further upstream would be obviously a benefit to the city, but then less of a detriment to the farmers, you know, rather than putting it all on the backs of just a couple farmers, have it spread out through that basin. So I don't know if any conversations have occurred on that topic, but
Dan, do you know if the city has talked to anybody about doing something like that?
I don't know that we've had any more conversations since then. The mayor was at one time quite involved with those conversations, but I have not heard anything from him in quite a while on that subject.
What we were proposing is a dry pond, and so theoretically, if it didn't flood too much, they still could farm it and have a crop, but they would only lose the crop a certain small percentage of the time if the floods came during the growing season. So, and we have money set aside in our fees in lieu of to help out fund it. So I just wondering where that stood. I guess it's not going anywhere right now, but
I'll get a hold of the mayor and talk to him about it and see if he's had any ongoing conversations.
okay, sounds good. And Kim, Milton's contribution to the program is what, 65,000 a year or 70,000?
let me see, I can get it for you here in just a minute.
Eric probably knows that.
Yeah, because 30,000 was recently paid in February. Maybe you paid the full amount, but yeah, another 30,000 in June. So $60,603.
Yeah, for about 1,200 pounds of phosphorus, roughly, I think.
Yes, 1254.
Ken Potter here. I'm sorry I'm late. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't hear the whole presentation, but you know, the cover crops have another benefit that's important. And that is evapotranspiration, reducing the amount of runoff to the lakes. So you know, I think you should take credit for that.
That's a good point. That's something we definitely haven't even looked at quantifying.
Okay, well, you know, if you want to talk to me about that,
Okay.
I'll help you, but that's important. The more green we can keep up in the county, you know, the more evapotranspiration is a big number, and so it makes a big difference in terms of volume control to the lakes. So this is good. Keep it up.
As Herb and I were just talking about ET today and how our ordinance doesn't address that, but ET is probably around 22 inches or 23 inches a year in this area. So that's the major part of the water budget is evapotranspiration.
Absolutely, it's the biggest, by far the biggest. So
Yeah.
we should keep that soil green as much as we can, and we ought to give them credit for doing it.
Yeah, something we ignored in our ordinance.
Yeah, we weren't thinking about that back then, but that was a while ago, you know. You have to admit it.
Yeah, when looking at Graver Pond, it just came to me like, whoa, we ignored a big thing right there. Well, thanks a lot, Kim. It was very good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time to talk today.
Yep, great.
Kim, do you
The next
want to
item
go
is-
through the annual report, or are we going to skip that one?
It's up to you if you want me to. I pulled out what I thought would be the most important, but I could definitely talk about anything in there that.
I'm sorry, Kim, I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, I'm willing to talk about whatever folks would like to hear about in the report, but I did pull out, I would say, the key items on the pounds and the water quality.
Okay, I'm sorry if you already covered it. My bad.
That's okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
Nothing
Kim.
else then? And the next item is on the agenda was the water quality summary for 2021 by me. USGS doesn't have the data yet for Pheasant Branch at Parmenter Street, so I didn't do it. We'll have to do it next time.
All right, we will defer.
Yeah, they analyzed their sediment data for the South Fork and North Fork from the Lab of Hygiene. And Parmenter Street, since it's a different project, is analyzed by the sediment lab in Kentucky, USGS lab. So they're behind their schedule, even though 2021 was not a wet year here at least. And so we didn't have very many samples, I didn't think. Anyway, we'll do it next time.
Okay. Next item is a development project on the north end of town that has just come in for a concept review. I don't think there's a good overview. I'm sliding a map in here to show you about where this lies. So this is Graver Pond, High Road right here, and Pheasant Branch Road right here. And the acre property is kind of T-shaped right in this area. There are several from the development group here on the meeting, so I'm not sure which one of you wants to take this over. Whoops.
Hey Eric, this is Tom Rogers with Smith Group.
Hi, Tom.
I can take over if you'd like.
All right, let me pull up your concept plan and you can take it away.
Sure. So I'm here with Chad Wibben and Tony Vandermus, and we are here to answer questions, but I'll walk through the overall approach to the plan. We did present this to Planning Commission, and we had a couple concept revisions we were making and took some feedback from staff and from Planning Commission and developed a further draft of the site plan. Overall, the development will be a mixed development that includes retirement community, apartments, townhomes, pocket neighborhood, which would be cottage homes, so smaller housing product that is more affordable, townhomes, and then single family homes. Overall, we wanted the development concept to be more dense to the west by High Road, and then less dense to the east, closer to Pheasant Branch. A couple of the core things to the overall layout and circulation were the extension of Bellefontaine through the site. So that comes through kind of just south of that red portion there, and it wraps up and it connects to the north, and that's part of the master plan for the area. Then we've used that as an organizational feature and tried to structure our lots, our roads, and our drainage around that, plus the open space pattern throughout the site. So to have a high level of connectivity, really leveraging Pheasant Branch as a resource and as a concept through this. So you see two colors of green. You see a lighter green where that 5.4 is, kind of in the middle, and then you see some darker green areas. And the 5.4 acres is what we set aside as a community park. So it's really at one of the prime locations in the site. It's up on the top of the hill. Very centrally located. The other locations that you see in the darker green are envisioned as connectors that are pedestrian connectors, and then stormwater areas. Or stormwater infiltration areas. We've identified two areas that you see in the darker blue color as stormwater basins, the 2.1 there and the 4.1 there. And then the lighter blue in 4.1 is a wetland that is located on the site. These have been sized as what we looked at for the maximum amount of stormwater that we would have to detain on site. What we have not done is we have not calculated in some of the other improvements that we might make, because this site plan has been a little bit in flux and that takes a little bit longer. So we would look at infiltration within these dark green areas, and then we are looking at things more on site or more localized on site with rain gardens for single family homes, between the cottage homes, and then mixed into the retirement community area as well. So we expect our overall stormwater approach to that would look a little bit skinnier in those blue areas, but we haven't calculated all of that yet. We've also included a small buffer on Pheasant Branch Road, and made some minor changes to our connectivity with our roads, both to the north, adding another connection there, and then to the south, to the adjacent property that sits south and southwest of the site. I think with that, maybe that's the brief summary. I could stop there if people have questions or comments with that as the overall. Unless, Chad, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, thanks, Tom. You did a great job.
I'll just jump in here with a couple of things. Staff's comments at this stage are mainly to do what Tom just described, I think, which is similar to what we asked for with Bell Farms, which was try to distribute some of this infiltration around the site, as opposed to trying to rely on 2 basins at the very bottom of the site. We also asked for 100% infiltration, and I guess I'm asking the commission to follow my recommendation to recommend that these guys do a soil investigation sooner rather than later to help inform this plan, figure out where they can maximize infiltration, and then if need be, perhaps adjust this plan to accommodate that.
I'm with you on that.
And Eric, this is Jim. Isn't a site plan required to have a certain amount of soil infiltration on-site testing done? And you're just asking them to be done earlier in the process? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, they're only at the concept phase,
Yeah.
so that's correct.
But yeah, the testing is required. It's just a matter of when then, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think this is great doing it ahead of time. So
yeah, absolutely.
I applaud that.
What's the overall percent of impervious area that's going to be happen? This looks like a very dense development.
Don't know if I can answer that question off the top of my head. Tony, do you happen to have that number? I don't have that at the ready. He might not either, actually.
What size single family lots are we talking about here? It looks like they vary a little bit. I know we're at the concept stage, but what are you looking at for?
They do vary a little bit, and if I remember correctly, they're averaging around 5,000 to 7,500 square feet.
That's pretty small then, okay.
They're smaller lots. There's a few larger ones in areas where we kind of had to fit larger ones, but generally we were looking at a smaller product. And there's some variability. We haven't quite dialed in that in total, because we realize there's some flux in the plan still as we refine, and so that'll tighten up a little bit as we move forward.
Can you hear me now? I was muted before.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is Tony. What we modeled it as was 65% impervious. There's actually a good amount of open space with those green corridors coming through. And so, I mean, the lots are generally smaller in some areas. But I think as an overall development, it should be on the average to slightly below average imperviousness. But again, this is master planning level. So when I did that 65% assumption was just based off of an average density of homes that we were assuming. We do have fairly favorable soils out here, some A soils and mostly Bs for the rest of the site. until you get down to where that wetland is. And I guess we should specify that wetland was conditionally or it was
Thank you.
assumed. It was done during when the ground was frozen, so they weren't able to do any test digs, and they weren't able to identify plants. So they need to go back out there this spring to actually do a true delineation. But that was kind of the shape that's shown. That lighter blue is their assumed extent, but it could grow or shrink with the actual investigation.
Have you considered grass swales instead of storm sewers?
Just gonna answer that question, Ken. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
So
because
the
yeah,
a
That
lot
could be
of
very
the
effective.
roads are set up so that, and you can kind of see through the contours that where those blue lines are in the valleys of the natural topography or existing
Mhm.
topography.
yeah,
So the theory here is to be able to do a lot of the water quality and infiltrative work on the way to the larger ponds, where the larger ponds are really there for the 2 through the 100 peak mitigation.
good.
But the roads themselves, I'm assuming, are still proposed for conventional curb and gutter type roads. It's the grass waterways that the roads would feed into then, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, there's a lot of topography to the site, so I'd imagine it's
Yeah.
gonna be a hybrid that, you'd have, like you said, gutter control and maybe inlets, but then surface discharging back to those swales as opposed to a main trunk line.
Mm-hmm.
The vision that we've spoken with Chad about is to do as much as we can at the source and distributing the stormwater around. So the green that's shown is really those are the dedicated green spaces for site circulation, but it's not necessarily the extent of the stormwater green that will exist.
Good approach.
I guess this site's going to have, at the previous talk, we talked about the loss of ET, and this is going to be the same problem here with 65% being impervious. We've lost ET from that much of the basin, so that's a considerable amount of increase in water that you're going to have to pass through the site. I guess the plan would be that it goes infiltration basins and they're effective enough that we don't increase the volume of runoff.
Well, the grass swales too.
Yeah, the swales will do the bulk of the
Yeah.
infiltration, I'm guessing.
Yeah, if as long as they're maintained, I mean, that's a critical issue. There needs to be a maintenance plan for those things.
And
But
not too steep, yeah.
and I think aesthetically, they're nice out when you get away from the city and to have grass swales. It's just greener.
This is a question that doesn't pertain particularly to the developer. Mainly a question for Eric and the city is there any consideration or just even preliminary discussion on the land to the south of this development that that's off-site, but there's this rectangular corridor here along the channel that goes from High Street to Pheasant Branch and into the Conservancy. And the city has, I think, an easement or ownership along some of that stretch, but not up to the south boundary of the of this development. Is there any thought about acquiring that strip in there and widening out the open space?
I think you're mostly correct, Jim. I think there's kind of two strips in here, and one of them is shown on the master plan as conservation land. The other, I think it was up in the air. I talked to the owner of this property, Ziegler, and I believe they had not been able to farm this area for several years until this past year. So, yeah, I think probably should be treated as conservation land moving forward, but it's privately owned at this point.
Yeah, it's
Has
subject.
it been too wet to farm?
It has been the last many years, but it's farmed this year.
Okay.
I just want to plant that seed. No pun intended. So Eric, you're asking for the commission to, I'm going back to the request the soil testing earlier. 100% infiltration. What else?
Soil investigation
Yeah, the soil testing, right.
sooner or now.
And I guess I would ask for clarification on that point. With the distributed nature that is being planned, there's gonna be a lot of testing that needs to occur. So I wouldn't propose doing all of that testing right now because locations are gonna change with time as the plan's actually developed. I could see a better recommendation to be to identify several key locations to test to kind of proof of concept. But to do 20 and then have to go out and do 20 more, that's seems to be an exercise in frustration.
What does the soil survey show here? Is it, can you learn much from that?
It's almost entirely B soils except for
Oh, you
where the
said that,
wetland
yeah.
is.
Yeah, so the B soil is probably going to have good infiltration, I would guess.
Yeah, so except for that south part where the wetland
Except for the
is.
south part, right, yeah.
And then a little part kind of in the center of the site where the farmhouse is has like a sea soil there. But there's actually an old gravel pit out there too. That's 2
Okay.
acres. That should be exceptional infiltration.
Yeah.
Eric, are you asking for, there's a text standard for DNR for site infiltration testing, site evaluation for stormwater infiltration, 1002. Are you asking for more? And that lays out the density of testing and, where to test. Are you asking for more than that?
No, I would be fine with a first step.
Okay. So so Tony, you've got to do 1002 anyway. And I understand the potential that you may need to go back and look at some other sites, but I know what soil surveys say and what you find in the field can not always be the same thing. Matter of fact, I never found it to be the same thing.
So what we're looking for, Eric, approval of a concept plan?
Well, I asked you to make recommendations and I threw out the 3 of them, and then, you guys can concur with those or modify them and add any others that you feel are appropriate at this stage. But you're not really approving anything here. It's just a concept, and
Yeah, right.
it's in flux, right, Tom and Tony?
Yep.
Yeah, I
When
think
is-
we're going in the right direction, so.
When does this go to CARBC for the urban service area amendment? Next. Is there a schedule for that?
Tom, is it accurate that should be in the next 3 months here?
That would be, I think that's an accurate assessment. It's hard for us to answer that exactly because it goes a little bit hand in hand with this, and we're working those details out with Eric and the city.
All right. So I'm going to make a motion then. This is Jim again, that we as a commission recommend this development meet the 100% infiltration condition, and that the soil testing be conducted as early in spring as weather allows, when frost is out and all that. And Eric, what's the last thing I'm missing here?
Distributed infiltration practices.
And I think Tony's already kind of abided by that, but that the land development focus on distributed infiltration approach to meet this requirement, the 100% infiltration requirement.
I'll
How's that?
second it. Yeah.
Can you, did I catch it all?
So essentially, that's all the recommendations by the staff. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, right. I'm trying to just rephrase what Eric provided to us.
And maybe we should clarify what level of soil investigation we're looking for.
Well, I'm going to suggest we simply use 1002 as the requirement, the process.
Well, I guess I'll remind you that 1002 can't be applied as there aren't any actual locations currently, as
Right.
we're in master planning.
Yeah, right.
I see. It does. Okay, the guidelines do lay out, density of, if I remember correctly, the number of testings per area, right?
Yeah, it states 1 per 10,000 square feet or 2 depending on the type of facility proposed. The problem is that it's supposed to be located within the footprint of the facility.
Okay.
Well, I think there's maybe
There's not-
1001, Tony talks
another-
about like a site assessment for infiltration.
That's what I'm reading here. I thought there were two things going on, and I'm a little bit rusty on this. There was one for the overall site and one when you have the locations determined. Standard 10 for developed sites. Consider storm. Other sites being considered. Well,
No,
Eric, if you're comfortable, I would like to think you and Tony and his staff could they could submit a plan, or you could guide them on a plan and say, yep, this will cover what we need for it at this point in time for locations and numbers.
okay, so the recommendation is to work with staff to do preliminary soil investigation to help identify areas that are receptive to infiltration.
Yeah, and it certainly gives you a better idea of how much infiltration you might expect. I mean, these rates can change a lot. It depends on how deep you are and all that. So,
Yeah, one thing we got to pay attention to is that, water tables have been rising, so it's really important that we be, when we do any development, that we understand where the water table is in those situations. So.
Well, and that's really what's behind this request, is that we don't want to, drive down this road where we're counting on the infiltration being achievable at the very bottom of the site. That's really the goal of the recommendation that I was asking for.
Well, that's the area will be real close to a water table too.
Right.
Okay, is that clear to everybody?
Yep.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So all in favor of the motion?
Bye.
Aye. Opposed? So the motion's carried. Thanks for the presentation.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for your time. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item then is the floodplain mapping.
Yes. So this is just a brief verbal from me. So I was able to talk with DNR floodplain guys, Chris Olds, and I've spoken with Steve Gaffield and Nick Hayden at Mars EOR a couple of times. And I think there's just one thing I want to try to get across. So their modeling was kind of non-standard. It's unsteady state flood modeling, which means that they're accounting for stormwater storage and the attenuation and, flow reduction it provides, which is not typically the way it's done. Usually you're given a flood flow and you're plugging it into a HEC-RAS model, which, accounts for the shape of the channel and the ground cover of the channel and culvert constrictions and things like that. But it's just a one-dimensional steady state model. And, so the model they built is better, but it may end up kind of causing us fits with trying to regulate this thing. I had a piece of this pulled up. So here's one of the maps that EOR produced for us. This is just north of the airport. And these crosshatch patterns are what they're considering, as storage in their modeling. So if we move forward with this right now, the DNR hasn't, I think Chris told me they have not yet reviewed a study like this, but he didn't anticipate any problems with it. And there are no DNR fees to review this or anything, so that's not an issue. But what's going to happen is all of these areas that are indicated as flood storage districts, we will, we won't be able to fill those areas at all. There's no longer there's not a flood fringe with this modeling, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You could always fill in the flood fringe, but not in the floodway. And since this is unsteady modeling, these areas all become floodway, really. And it may be, if we put a little storage shed out here, that it's not going to have any impact, but it would still, to meet the regulations, somebody would have to go back and run the model again and prove that there's less than that 100th foot of fall. So I'm a little, I'm not sure what the discussions were 3 years ago when you all went through this process. And I'm wondering if this may have been one of the stumbling blocks that kind of set it aside for a bit.
What happens? All these lands that are, storing water, that's private, a lot of that's private property, right?
Well, here's Esser Pond on what I'm showing you now.
Yeah, there, obviously, yeah.
Little strip mall just west of the Beltway. It's all in flood storage district.
Okay, but the stuff north, how much of that is, are we assured that's going to stay flood storage? All the hatched areas are going to never be developed?
Well, that's the question. Can we?
I don't know that we can we?
Pick and choose. And how on earth would we do that without, raising ethical concerns?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue there. So, we got to look at the ownership of that land, and I don't know that we ought to be we're not going to tell the landowner they can't do anything there, right?
Well, Ken, there's plenty of land. Let's not even talk about Milton, anywhere that's privately owned in a floodway or floodplain that the owner can't do things with unless they get the proper permits and demonstrate no impact on flooding.
Yeah, I know, but this is much more extensive than it would usually be.
Agreed.
And so I'm just wondering, Dan, are the landowners aware of what we've done here? And
right. No,
are we going to get a big battle?
We had big meetings and had people in, but I totally agree that the reality of it wouldn't have sunk in until somebody's told, well, your land, Eric, go back to that shopping center down by Esser Pond. I mean, it means if that person wanted to add to the building at all or something like that. Is that the Fairfield Inn down there, the motel?
I don't know, Jim.
I think it is.
There's a bank. I think there's a motel or a
Or the
hotel.
Marriott, one of those two. Not Marriott, but I think.
And there's a couple of, smaller
Starbucks is there and big hamburger
Five
place.
Guys.
Five Guys is there.
Yeah,
This is really what's going to flood, right? In the 100-year
Right.
storage area.
right.
So I guess I don't see any problem doing that.
No,
They shouldn't be building their anyway, probably.
in my mind, it's a dilemma because if we trust this is the best information we have, well, this is in fact where that water is going to sit. Do we want to allow uncontrolled or no consideration of flood impacts by building in those areas? And it's kind of hard to argue that when, given what we had in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an issue we got to discuss.
Yeah, that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, all the landowners are going to have to understand that. And I'm thinking more of the ones up further north.
Yeah.
They're forever. They can't put a building in there. Is that?
Well, the way this is laid out now, Ken, I think the worst impacts are adjacent to Esser and South Pond.
Okay.
Here, check this out. This is co-op and
Right,
lumberyard over here.
right.
Right.
This is quite a bit of their land.
Is,
And
So what?
this is
what
a
conditions do they
lawyer
build?
question. Oh, sorry. A
What would they
lawyer
have to do if
question
they wanted
is,
to build there, what would they have to prove?
well, Warren, because my thought here is, if these are FEMA floodplain delineations, well, then there's a set of requirements, regulations, blah, 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 that have to be followed. But, and Eric, I'm not expecting you to know the answer, but is there an option that these areas are not considered FEMA floodplains, but they're still city
Yeah.
areas of concern, call it what you want, that the city can invoke some kind of step that needs to be looked at if these areas are going to be, changed topographically.
I think, yes, we could do this without FEMA approval. I think we would need DNR approval. And I
Well-
think as far as that goes, FEMA is really relying on DNR to a great extent to review these flood models first. But if this is designated as a flood district, then, you can't fill in it unless you provide compensatory
Right.
storage somewhere.
Right.
And,
But is it officially designated?
Not now.
well, not
No.
yet, no.
Okay, so, all right, well, we have to,
But
They could build there, but they'd have to pay flood insurance, right?
mm,
no, they can't take storage. with
No,
it.
they can't take the storage. If this was a more traditional study, then this area that's outside of what you'd think is the conveyance would most likely be flood fringe, and they could fill in there, and then they would prove, yeah, we're up above the floodplain and the model shows there's no impact. I don't know if there's an avenue for them to fill in a flood storage district if they could remodel the whole thing and show there's no impacts, but that would be a
that's unlikely.
cost, a tremendous cost also.
So I'm trying to find out if there's an option of not having a DNR flood district. I understand what those are. Those are, again, we've worked with those in other communities, but does the city have the authority to create their own district? Call it what you want, call it a region or designated area, something. I don't know the answer to that.
The local authority is the one that's in charge of administering this flood mapping. you know. That said, we're supposed to be following the rules, you know, but it is us who's supposed to enforce and administer this thing, not the state and not FEMA. And we're supposed to be doing it based on the best available data. So the question is really, well, I don't even know if I can phrase the question well at this point.
But we didn't do these modeling studies under any regulatory or requirement.
Right.
In my understanding, we did them because we wanted to get a better idea of our high water conditions, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But I think we also talked about updating the floodplain too, mapping program.
Well,
If that was the case, then we should have gone to steady state instead of unsteady state, I suppose.
we should have just followed the traditional HEC2 modeling and been done with it. But that's,
But this is a more accurate model.
I agree. We wanted better answers. Now we're stuck with better answers.
To make a developer aware that he's building in a spot that could be flooded seems to be a good information for them.
And I should stick in here again, you know, if we take away these flood storage areas, what's the model going to do? It's going to raise flood elevations downstream.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just squeezing one end of the balloon here.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder
Dan,
what
this is Dan Ramsey. This is obviously a council issue and a policy issue and a legal issue.
Yeah, and a planning issue and
Yeah.
because a lot of there's periodically talk about redeveloping the fish site, and so yeah, it's nothing is really moving forward now, but periodically it comes up in discussion.
So we have the technical information in our right in front of us here. Here's the situation. What do you want to do about it from a policy point of view?
is it possible to get this officially FEMAized? No. Okay.
Well, Eric, I didn't mean to answer that. I doubt it. It would take quite a bit of gyrations, right?
Well, I mean, it's.
No, I
Go
think EOR could take the work that they've done so far and run it through and get it approved by DNR and FEMA. I mean, we'd pay them to do that. It's entirely possible to get this instituted as our new flood maps.
I think it would be worthwhile. And they have all the models set up, so it would be worthwhile to see what the impact is, say, on a 100-year flood if we get rid of some of these areas. Because maybe this isn't that big a deal. It seems like a lot of area, but on the other hand, what's the depth of flow? How much water is sitting there? Is it right? Is it a centimeter or a meter?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Steve explained to me is that they selected these areas only if they were impactful, only if they thought that they made a difference. Now, whether or not they went back and weighed or reweighed and said, well, if we get rid of this, does it really impact, or if they just kind of did that by feel, I'm not sure. But there's roughly like 8 of these spots. There's a couple up at the airport. There's Confluence South and Esser. There is a reach of the creek between Park and
Central.
I don't remember. It's one of the 2 major reaches, either between Park and Century or between Park and Parmenter.
Eric, can you go farther north, just past University Avenue, where Point Burgers used to be?
Yeah, so it's, and you can note, here's South Pond again down here. This channel, they have not modeled using the storage. It's not an unsteady model. So this whole reach of South Fork here, you know, there are properties that are impacted by the 100-year floodplain, but it's more traditional with the fringe and the floodway.
I know Point Burger got flooded out and they didn't have floodplain insurance. And so somehow we got a responsibility to tell people too, that they're in the floodplain. I mean, he lost his business because of it. Yeah, a little bit further over yet.
Seems like we got to bring a lawyer in on this too.
Yeah.
I mean, if further to your right there.
I mean, better to do it now than to do it when there's a, you know, somebody wanting to do something and then we say they can't, and then it gets really messy. So
Yeah, no, it's, yeah.
Now that area by USGS South Fork Gauge, that's where the Point Burger was and they got flooded. Is that an area that we're talking about? Steady state, it wouldn't be there?
I guess I'm not sure the location then, Warren, if it's down by USGS.
No, let's see that box where it says USGS South Fork Gauge.
Oh, yeah, right in here.
yeah.
Yeah. Up
So
there
now
right there
this-
is where,
He's showing the flood storage district as a crosshatch, and this type of pattern is just a traditional floodway,
Okay.
with the blue area being a fringe.
so it's the same problem there, that fringe area. Go
Yeah,
back up to
but,
that site.
but theoretically, someone in the fringe can fill
Mhm.
without impacting the floodplain.
Right, but at least they should be aware that they're in that flood fringe and could get wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Wait.
not like this question is not coming up. We have given people this information who are looking to redevelop and all those kinds of things.
But if we had official floodplain map from FEMA, when they went to that bank for a loan, they would find out they had to have insurance, right?
Yes.
Which seems like that's important, let people know. And don't they get a discount if they're in the floodplain fringe like that, if they have FEMA insurance?
Well, if they were developing, they'd be required to either floodproof or lift the building up above the 100-year.
Yeah. To me, that seems desirable.
Eric, are there some graphics that compared this modeling with the current FEMA flood fringe and floodway?
That's a good
boundaries?
one. I'd like to see that.
I think there
No,
are.
not that I've seen or not that I have handy, but that could be pretty easily prepared, I think, Jim.
I think
Yeah.
they did that before, because I think Gary showed us that before and the thing that where there was a difference.
I thought I
Yeah.
saw that somewhere in the past.
Yeah.
Well, what I had originally asked you guys a few months ago was that we should probably come up with an inventory of all these properties that are affected.
Well, I'd be interested, Eric, in the ones that are impacted with this set of modeling and were not impacted by the current FEMA mapping.
Yeah. Sure, but then we're losing the increased rainfall depths that you guys asked them to model with.
Yeah, true.
A whole lot of better information. The grant model, and this doesn't really impact anything, but the grant model did not include the culverts underneath Park. I've brought this up a couple of times, but those are two 14-foot diameter culverts.
Yeah, right. Huh.
And the flood model just shows that all overtopping Park Street. Which didn't overtop in 2018.
Which didn't over, right.
So that's all in the steep valley of the channel, and there's not really any properties that are impacted, but that's the difference in the level of modeling we're talking about here.
We got to be aware too that our 100-year floods have been increasing dramatically on the in Pheasant Branch, going up from 800 CFS about 10, 15 years ago to over 2,000 now, and it's probably going to continue to increase. So this 100-year floodplain is probably going to be out of date in 10 years if climate change continues, which it probably will. And we have nothing that's going to happen in the future to reduce the floods on the South Fork.
I can't even think of what next steps we ought to be asking about.
What did you say, DNR could take a look at this and give us an opinion?
Well, I think if we move forward, DNR will have to review it.
Okay,
They've already kind of alerted me to what this issue that we're stepping into may be, which is we won't have a flood fringe in a lot of these areas. It'll all be floodway, flood storage district.
Who's the DNR staffer these days on this issue?
Well, Chris Olds is who I called, and he actually sat in on the phone call, but there is another gentleman who was going to be the primary reviewer.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have his name in front of me, Ken.
Okay.
so if we decide to move forward, it goes to DNR first, and then can we look at what their opinion is and stop it if we want to, and not go to FEMA?
Yeah, I think we ought to sit down with DNR first and brainstorm a little bit on this.
Should we invite them to a future meeting to discuss?
Is it illegal to have a meeting that's not an official meeting, that we just sit down and brainstorm without having it part, we all sit around a table and talk about it? Is that legal?
I think you could limit it to 2 of you, 3 of you.
Yeah, it has to be less than a quorum.
That would seem to be desirable. We'll meet in the conference room at the city with you, Eric, and several people from the commission, talk about the options.
Yeah. I think we are, this could be a big can of worms if we
It's a
don't
big deal.
get on top of this.
Are these images in a large format? Eric, do you have a hard copy, large sheets of these?
I don't. And this seems to be kind of an extra. I think there might be a more a copy that with better definition. I don't know what resolution, excuse me.
Okay. I mean,
But I'm
that's
sure EOR can give us this in GIS format and we can use it, or, to make
I
our.
would you think about having a conference table with hard copies to look at and point to instead of going on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would prefer that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, can you set that up, Eric?
I can.
Are we allowed to have face-to-face now in the city hall?
Yeah, the city hall is open.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that? Probably should have one.
If you want to make one, maybe you could identify what members of the commission will sit in.
I'd like to sit in.
I'd like to sit in.
Warren, you should sit in.
Yeah, I could sit in too. Is that too many?
Those three, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
That's probably,
But
I mean, we
I
could
don't
have,
want to, I want to hear from Julie and
So,
Sue here and make sure we're not ramrodding this thing.
That's
Well, we're
fine
just
with me. I'm not making a trip from Albuquerque.
no, you gotta
Hey,
be
it was
there.
nice today. It was nice today.
we're not gonna make any decisions. I mean, we're just gonna get information, so.
Right.
It'll get presented to the whole committee and.
I think that's a good idea. I'm all for that. And
I
the three of
agree.
you would be good. I don't feel left out at all.
Okay. So are we going to make a motion?
Dan, do we need a motion or can,
I don't know that we.
No, we don't need a motion. Let's just
I
set
don't
up.
think we need a motion.
yeah,
Okay, very good.
Just put together a meeting and that's that.
hey,
Yeah.
Warren,
Yeah,
Rick Eilertson has his hand up. Do you want to recognize him?
sure. Okay,
Yeah,
Rick.
Warren, just one thing that you may want to consider doing before the meeting is just to go back and watch the presentation that Steve gave at the February 2nd, 2020 Common Council meeting. And he described the two different options that the city of Middleton had, either to just accept the report as it is and actually go through the process to formally adopt. And then formally adopting those maps would obviously have some legal ramifications, some positive ramifications, some for the city, some negative connotations for certain property owners. But regardless, there's flooding impacts, regardless of whether the city adopts or doesn't adopt those maps. And so, I do think your idea of actually getting some legal counsel advice on the pros and cons of formally adopting and going through that process. But probably reading the report that Steve gave to the final report that should be with the Common Council packet for February 4th of 2020 would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So do we do that on our own or do it at the next meeting? Watch that.
Can you dig it out and give us a link? Is that possible?
I can send you a link, sure.
Okay.
I'd rather do it that way than, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's great.
I just send the link to the entire committee then so the others can watch it too if they wish.
Right.
Certainly.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, good suggestion.
And
Okay.
if the report's on the city site,
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be in the presentation should be on the YouTube site. So this easily tracked down.
okay,
Good.
I'll send it to all.
thanks.
I wonder if we should have Steve attend that meeting too.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I would see this as an extension of their work, not something we would go out to proposals for a new consultant. So yes.
Okay. So does that mean we should pay him then, or he would just extension of his work, he would come?
Well, he is working on a contract amendment for a few things. One was some new scenarios downstream to reduce flood elevations, and we can craft that, I think, as we need to get these answers.
Okay, great. Okay, very good.
Okay.
And there's items for the April meeting then.
Oops, these are the minutes.
I will confirm with Greg Freeze his presence at that meeting. He said that would work for him, but I'll just reconfirm that.
Okay, then I should have the data for Pheasant Branch at Parliament Street for settlement, and so then I could make a presentation on the 2021 monitoring effort we had, which shouldn't take too long, probably 10-15 minutes. When is Graber Pond going to come back?
I don't know. D'Onofrio, the consultant for Bell Farms, has made some progress, but just last week kind of started sharing information with MSA about Graber. We've also got the Parmenter project that's going to impact things, and that's just kind of starting to form. There's some researchers from UW who want to come next month and do a study on Tiedemann and Stricker about carbon.
Carbon?
Marvin?
Yeah, like, I'll phrase this wrongly, but like running a water balance, except we're talking about carbon and what happens with eutrophic ponds. How the carbon enters and leaves the system.
Yeah, okay, that should be interesting. Saw last week on the neighborhood site that someone was going to buy Tiedemann or Stricker's pond.
It caused quite a hullabaloo.
What happened?
Have you
Some
ever
guy
been
in
on Nextdoor? Somebody, a jokester, said he was looking to buy one of Middleton's famous kettle ponds and said, which one's better, Tiedemann or Stricker?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you get a next door too much, that'll just get you in trouble.
He got a number of replies, and I think some people took him seriously.
Somebody had to call Mike Davis to put an end to it.
Is that an April Fool's thing or something?
No, I don't know what the guy was doing.
It's too early.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just kidding around, I guess. So the city's got a new replacement for Mike, I see.
Yes, a gentleman named Brian Gaddow, who is, as we speak, is the city administrator in the city of Monona. And before that, he was in New Glarus.
Are you saying a selection has been made? I missed that.
Yes, selection has
Oh.
been made.
Oh, okay, great.
And the gentleman hired, his name is Brian Gaddow.
I read the candidates, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I guess that's it. Meeting's adjourned.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Yep, good night.